It started as an ordinary day in a quiet suburban neighborhood, but everything took a shocking turn when police confronted a black nanny outside a local park. She had been caring for two young white children, laughing and playing together like any family would. But someone had called the authorities, suspicious of the scene. The officers demanded answers, and before she could fully explain, they arrested her on suspicion of kidnapping. The children cried, confused and scared, as bystanders watched in disbelief. What the officers uncovered next changed everything. This was no ordinary case, and the truth behind this nanny's story would leave the entire community stunned. Who was she really, and why had her presence sparked such a dramatic response? Stay tuned to hear the incredible revelation that turned this incident into a story no one could forget. As the nanny was led into the back of the police car, her mind raced. How had things escalated so quickly? She had been working for the family for years, caring for the children as if they were her own. The kids' parents had always trusted her completely, but none of that seemed to matter now. Neighbors whispered among themselves, trying to piece together what they thought they knew. Some claimed they'd seen her with the kids many times before, while others admitted they never really paid attention. A woman who had called 911 stood nearby, her arms crossed, convinced she had done the right thing. "You just never know these days," she muttered. Meanwhile, the children kept crying, asking for their nanny and begging the officers to let her go. But as the police began digging into her identity, they uncovered something unexpected, something no one in the neighborhood could have predicted. Back at the police station, the nanny sat quietly, her hands trembling as she tried to process what was happening. She thought about the kids and how scared they must have been when she was taken away. All she could do was hope the truth would come out. But as the officers reviewed her identification and questioned her, they began to uncover details that made the situation far more complicated than anyone imagined. Meanwhile, the parents of the children rushed to the station as soon as they heard what had happened. Furious and confused, they demanded answers, insisting their nanny was like family and would never harm their children. But the officers hesitated, pointing to information they had found that raised more questions than it answered. At the same time, the story began spreading through the neighborhood. People debated whether the nanny had been treated unfairly or if there was more to her story than met the eye. The tension only grew as whispers of her mysterious past began to circulate. As the parents argued with the officers, demanding the release of their nanny, one of the detectives pulled them aside. He showed them a file he'd been reviewing, and their faces fell in shock. It wasn't just about her identity, it was something buried deep in her past. The parents exchanged worried glances, their confidence now shaken. Who was this woman they had trusted with their children for so long? In the days that followed, the family sat down with the nanny to talk about everything that had come to light. The parents apologized for doubting her, understanding now how much she had endured and how deeply she cared for their children. For the nanny, it was an emotional journey. Reconnecting with the child she had lost, even in this unexpected way, felt like a part of her heart was finally healing. The community, too, began to reflect on how quick they had been to judge. Neighbors who had been suspicious came forward to offer apologies, realizing their assumptions had caused unnecessary harm. The nanny, while grateful for their words, made it clear she wanted to move forward, focusing on the love and connection she now had with the family she cared for. Though life would never be the same, they all agreed to rebuild with honesty, trust, and a newfound bond that would never break. Back in the holding room, the nanny sat under the harsh fluorescent lights, her heart pounding. She knew what the officers had likely found, and while she hadn't broken any laws, she had kept parts of her life hidden. She had her reasons, but would they understand? Outside the station, the scene was growing chaotic. Reporters had caught wind of the incident, and the community was divided. Some defended the nanny, calling the arrest unjust, while others speculated wildly about her secret. The truth was about to come out, but no one could predict the shocking turn it would take. As the hours dragged on, tension in the station reached a boiling point. The parents were desperate to get their nanny released, but the lead detective wasn't budging. "There's more to this story," he said, sliding a second file across the desk. It contained documents and photos that revealed a part of her life no one had known about, not even the parents. Meanwhile, the nanny's mind raced as she sat alone. She knew the truth was about to come to light, but she hadn't anticipated it would happen like this. Her past wasn't something she was proud of, but it wasn't something she had hidden out of malice. It was for her safety. Now everything was unraveling. At that moment, one of the children's parents burst into the room. Their voice was filled with equal parts anger and confusion. "Why didn't you tell us?" they demanded. The nanny's silence only deepened the mystery, and for the first time, doubt crept into their voice. Outside, the crowd grew louder as reporters scrambled for answers. Rumors swirled, and the community's support began to fracture. The stakes were higher than ever, and the real question lingered. Could the truth ever set her free, or would it destroy everything? Just as tensions reached their peak, the lead detective returned to the room with a final piece of evidence. He placed a photograph on the table in front of the nanny. It was an old picture of her, holding a baby in her arms, a baby who looked eerily similar to the children she was accused of kidnapping. The room fell silent. The parents stared at the image, their confusion growing deeper. With tears welling up in her eyes, the nanny finally spoke. She explained that years ago, she had been forced to make an impossible decision. The baby in the photo was her own child, who she'd had to give up during a time of immense hardship. When she took the nannying job, she had no idea the children she cared for were connected to that part of her past. But as she spent time with them, she began to see glimpses of her lost child in their smiles and mannerisms. The parents were stunned. They had unknowingly adopted the baby she had been forced to give up, and none of them had ever pieced it together until now. Emotions ran high as the truth sank in. The charges were dropped immediately, but the room was left heavy with the weight of what had just been revealed. In the end, the nanny and the parents agreed to find a way forward, though none of them could have anticipated the bond that had tied them together all along.